for this evening. We're very honored to have with us tonight Clark Ivory. Clark is the new chairman of the Board of Trustees for the University of Utah. He's also a graduate of the University of Utah with a BA in political science, and he has an MBA from Harvard Business School. Clark Ivory is also the CEO of Ivory Homes. Please join me in welcoming Clark Ivory.
Well, this is exciting to be in this venue and to introduce one of the guys that I think is just the hottest professors in the country. We were so excited to get Chris to come to the University of Utah, and he is one of our presidential professors. I've enjoyed working with him ever since he's arrived. I'm going to give you a little background. He is really known for understanding and having a pulse on the changing trends in demographics and understanding how those relate to planning and to housing in particular. He's great with ideals, but he understands the importance of being pragmatic. And that comes because he had a number of years, I think, in the real world. 130 articles, 22 books, 300 other publications. He was at Georgia Tech before coming to us at the University of Utah. He spent 15 years there, before that 6 years at Virginia Tech, but he's really from Portland, so he's a Westerner. We like that about him too. In Portland, he was a consultant and a developer, and he dug in the trenches and really understood what the development business was all about. He is now a presidential professor of city and metropolitan planning at the University of Utah, and the founding director of the Mountain Metropolitan Research Center, which I'm very excited about. It's going to do some very cool things at the university, and we're figuring out how to make sure that its reach extends all the way across this country and throughout the world. In my hand, I have his latest book, and it is Megapolitan America. In fact, it just came out yesterday, and this is going to be a winner. There is so much interest in what he had to say here. I think yesterday he spent 8 hours straight on the radio. Do I have your interest? We're going to hear from an amazing guy, Chris Nelson, who loves to be back west and loves Utah. Let's welcome him.
Thank you. I'm going to be presenting some new ideas, some challenges for planners and developers and policymakers about how the United States is changing in fundamental ways and how we are in many senses behind the 8 ball, but we're not so far behind that we can't work ourselves out of the situation and into a better situation. But it starts with the American dream, which we all know as the single-family home on a detached lot, ideally free and clear. But that American dream is morphing. It's not that the dream is going away. The dream is becoming more complex, more nuanced. And part of that has to do with things like demographic changes, housing market changes, housing finance changes, and above all, how people's preferences for the kinds of homes they live in, the kinds of neighborhoods they have, the kinds of communities they live in, are changing in very interesting and important ways. We start off first with the idea that the composition of the American household is changing dramatically. I'm a product of the baby boom. During the baby boom, about half of American households had children in them. By 2000, it was down to about a third. By 2030 or so, it'll be down to about a quarter. So we're finding a situation where more and more of our households don't have children in them, and more households are becoming single-person households. If you run the numbers, the number of single-person households between 1970 and 2030 will have increased 6 times, sixfold. It is the fastest growing market segment in our housing market today. This year, 2011, baby boomers start turning 65. Baby boomers were born in 1946 through 1964, so 2011 through 2029, they'll turn 65. So as the baby boomers turn 65 this year, beginning mid-decade, 2015, 2016, going through about 2040, they will be unloading homes in unprecedented numbers. If you're in a state like Oklahoma or Georgia, you want to have more buyers than sellers of homes. That's a good thing. But if you're in Michigan, you now will see a situation, already see a situation in Michigan where you have more sellers of homes than buyers. Where you have more buyers of homes than sellers, prices go up, or prices stabilize anyway. Where you have more sellers than buyers, all bets are off. So we're going to have challenges in most of the country up through 2020, probably up through 2030. When a senior moves, what do they move from and what do they move into? When they move, seniors will make a very dramatic change. Now, the population of people over 65 to 85 or so, that population owns homes at the highest rate of any age group in the country. About 80% of that group owns their homes. Before they move, 20% of seniors rent. 80% own. When they move, 60% of seniors rent. That is a dramatic change. That's the most dramatic change of any move among any age group that there is in the housing market. That over the next decade or two, or longer, we'll be seeing smaller homes, maybe with more people in them, smaller lots, more attached units, and more renters, including more people doubling up and renting. Another trend is going on that I think is subtle but is creeping up on the American household psyche. Energy prices are going up. I suspect that American households are now including the expectation of higher gasoline prices in their current decisions to buy homes. And I think this is eroding the suburban fringe, the ex-urban housing markets in metropolitan areas as people then realize, what's it going to be like in 2020? Long commute, high gasoline prices. Maybe I better hedge my bets and stay closer in, even if that means renting and certainly buying a smaller home. In some metropolitan areas, it costs more to maintain your car and buy gasoline than it does to have your own home. We're already spending more in transportation in some metropolitan areas than we are on housing. That is going to have to change if we're going to be sustainable. This particular chart sort of shows the population change by race and ethnicity between 2000 and 2040. Notice the share of the population that are white non-Hispanic. We basically peak out in 2020 among white non-Hispanics, and we don't grow thereafter. We don't grow thereafter till 2100. But notice Hispanic and other population groups that continue to add share to the total population. And to be more blunt, between 2010 and 2040, Hispanics will account for 60-some% of the entire population change. White non-Hispanics will be 9%, and the other groups picking up the rest. As the demographics change and our housing finance situations don't respond and educational systems don't respond, we will see declining home ownership rates guaranteed. The bottom line is, for the nation as a whole, if we did not change the 2010 level of home ownership rates by racial and ethnic group between 2010 and 2020, 45% of the total new demand for housing in the U.S. would be for rental housing, 45%, assuming no change in the 2010 home ownership level by race and ethnic group. If we assume the home ownership rate declines by just 5%, which is the most plausible outcome of all the literature I've read, 80% of all new homes between now and 2010 or 2020 would have to be for renters. But we might plan on at least 50% of the next wave of demand for housing between now and mid-decade to be for rental housing. The National Association of Realtors in 2011, this year, did a national survey to find out what it was people wanted. The first question they asked, or one of the first questions they asked, is, today, what kind of home would you like to live in? And you had all the usual choices. 80% of the respondents said they want to be in a single-family detached home. But then when you ask them other questions, what kind of neighborhood? How far away do you want to be from work? Do you want to walk some more? As people are confronted with alternatives and choices between alternatives, their outcomes are a little different. Well, it turns out that about half of American households want to be now in a more urban or mixed-use suburban environment. Even more dramatic, if people are choosing between a large house with a long commute or a small house and a short commute, 60% will take the small house and short commute. We also see that people want to be able to walk to places. Not that everybody wants to walk every place all the time, but 35% of the population says it's very important to be able to walk to the grocery store. 75% say it's very important or somewhat important to walk to the grocery store. And notice how this holds up across a large number of potential walking destinations. Also from the National Association of Realtors, we find that people will score the attributes they want in neighborhoods. They want walkability, 65%. They want sidewalks, 75%. They want to be able to walk to a restaurant, 60%. Notice at the tail end of this, 40% think it's important to own or to live in new homes. That's a sizable amount, no doubt. But notice all the other attributes, which are really neighborhood attributes, carry the day in terms of people's preferences these days. So now we come to a series of surveys. I won't explain all of these surveys, but what we've done over the past year at the universities, we've assembled the nation's largest number of raw surveys, the actual sheets of surveys that people responded to between 2001 and 2011. And we've looked at all of these surveys and come up with some very interesting long-term trends. It turns out that about half of Americans want to live in a walkable community, a mixed-use community. Half of Americans want that opportunity. Now, it's not everybody. It's not even 3/4. But half want that, which is a very significant number, and I know that we're not achieving anywhere near that number in our city planning and development. About 1/4 of Americans want to be able to walk or bike to work, and 1/4 or so want to be able to walk or bike to errands, shopping and groceries and things like that. Well, it turns out that only 4% of Americans actually do walk or bike to work, and 10% walk or bike for errands. When we look more carefully at how far away work is from where people live, say within a mile, it turns out that 37% of Americans who live within a mile of work walk or bike to work. And that trend has been increasing, and for shopping as well. This is a sea change in this country, and we're not prepared for where the market really is taking us. AHS, American Housing Survey. The American Housing Survey is done every 2 years, and it finds out, among all kinds of other things, what the current supply of housing is around the country. In 2009, the last year this was done, 28% of Americans lived in attached products, 29% on small lots, and 43% on large lots. Massive mismatch between what people want and what they have. We built homes in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s to meet the then demand for homes, which was for large lots in suburbs. But that supply doesn't go away. You build a home, it lasts 150 years or 200 years. It would take us a generation, 20, 30, 40 years to add to the supply of housing sufficiently to move the numbers to where the market is. So the 43% is based on the demands of the past that we certainly met, but it's not consistent with where the market is now or trending to the future. If we didn't build any more homes on large lots between now and 2050, and assuming that the 24, 25% of the market still wants the large homes, we would still end up in 2050 with 25 million more homes on large lots than the market demands. So let's also look at the aging population. Look at the share of the population among adults at 2030. Roughly half of the population in 2030 will be in the downsizing, assisted living, small home, attached home mode. We also know from surveys and other instruments that the Gen Y households or the Gen Y population and the millennials want something different in their neighborhoods, in their life. We know that about a third are willing to pay more for walkable communities and walkable neighborhoods. But you know, the boomers also want something else. In many respects, it'll be the boomers that drag the rest of us into smart growth and mixed-use communities and walkable communities, because these are things they want. We know this from all kinds of surveys coming out and also from the retirement communities. Figuring out what the baby boomers want, they want the recreation. They want the walkable neighborhoods. They want the running paths, the walking paths. They want the smaller unit. They want the clubhouse. They don't want the golf course. So we're facing a new kind of America with changing demands and preferences and changing realities. We're moving away from the expectation that we'll have a 40-year career ahead of us in one place, in one city. I'm seeing among students the desire, the thirst to be flexible, to move anywhere, to get any job, almost at any price to stay employed. Now we're seeing people want life cycle communities. If I move to a place as a young adult with a small family, I want to be able to maintain my social networks and maintain my friendships with people. I want to have the flexibility to be able to move within my community, stay within my community, but find the housing that then matches my needs. It used to be we didn't mind being far away from a job. Actually, kind of like being far away from the job, but maybe gasoline prices have us thinking about shorter commutes. We used to have cheap gas. We all know that. Now we know that gasoline prices are going to continue increasing. We want to have the opportunities to use different modes to get around, walking, biking, the train, the bus, and the car if we have to. It used to be that transit was for those people. Well, where's my transit? We always assumed that all homes will gain in value. Now we're finding in the marketplace people are being very astute. Well, will this home in 10 years be worth more than it is now when I buy the home? Or there's no longer the assumption that you buy a home, you make money. And I love my cookie cutter suburb. Now it's now replaced with I want a place to live in, a place that has opportunities around me. Well, there's a lot of work ahead of us. We need to figure out what the realistic needs are between now and 2010 or 2020, and as planners and architects and public officials and builders work together to figure out how to best meet those challenges. We need to reform our fiscal structures. We reward urban sprawl, low density, large lots, through our pricing of utilities and pricing of gasoline and pricing of transportation. If we flip that around, people actually will respond. We're sending the wrong pricing signals. If we're moving towards a society composed more and more of renters, did you know that renters are discriminated against in the property tax system? Homeowners in this state and most states get a homestead exemption. They get a tax break. Renters don't. We need to provide life cycle housing and mixed housing in our communities. We need to level the lending playing field. Buying a condominium should be easy, maybe easier to do than buying a home. But it's the most difficult product to buy because of the excesses of Miami and Vegas and Phoenix and Los Angeles. We are punished. We need to instill permitting discipline to balance supply and demand. Now I know that builders don't like this when I say this, but why do we have the state of Ohio that grew by 100,000 people in the 2000s permit 300,000 new homes? We think in planning terms of 1 home per 3 people. Ohio thinks 3 homes per person. We also need to recognize the efficiencies gained by locations and energy efficiency. We need to find a way where we reward people for saving money on transportation, saving money on energy, and capitalize those savings in their ability to borrow more money to buy a home to be closer in, which, by the way, will appreciate better than the home in the exurban areas. Thank you all so very much.